Hey everybody, this is the first podcast for Did You Know History? And today we're going to start off with a general introduction about ourselves and just general introduction about history. So I have my good friend Robin. Say hi, Robin.
Hi, hi all.
Yeah, he's from the UK. So Robin is just like me. I was a history major, he wasn't, but he's a big fan of history, and he will be coming on more regularly to the podcast. Sometimes with other guests, but yeah. So today is just the general introduction about this podcast and history. So first off, Robin, you could just introduce yourself a little bit, like where you're from, your background, maybe how we met, you know.
Yeah, sure. I'm from Greenwich in London. So Greenwich is part of London now. It's part of Greater London. Um, Historically, it was its own kind of town. Very historic town though. For example, I believe um, Henry VIII was born here.
Whoa.
Which a lot of people probably are familiar with him as an English king. And
What is Greenwich most famous for?
I think it's naval traditions
Oh,
because, as you
I
know,
meant the time thing.
oh wait, what? Oh, that time thing. Yeah, sorry, you're right. Well, I mean, but they're linked. They are linked. So because Greenwich was a center of um, naval power in Britain, um, uh, it was chosen as the site of you know the, the Greenwich Mean Time, the Meridian Line, where you've got 0 hour that runs. I don't know. Is it longitudinally, latitudinally
I had a Did You
down?
Know video, and I put that in there with.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it happened fairly recently with. It was like some anniversary where they decided it.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Well, there you go.
So Robin, where did you? How did you and I meet? Maybe people are curious.
Well, we met in Korea in 2012. Right?
Yeah, 2012.
Yeah. Well, actually,
And
yeah,
end
yeah.
of 2012, around there. Yeah,
Yeah, because I remember because we celebrated Christmas, right?
yeah. But prior to that,
And that was the first
yeah, yeah,
time.
yeah.
Yeah, prior to that, we knew each other. But I think um, because I didn't get to Korea until November, and you had been there
September.
since
Yep.
September. Yeah. So yeah, and obviously, we lived sort of nearish to Seoul, easy to get there for weekends out. And yeah, and then obviously we've been in China together as well. Well, not
True.
together,
True. Yeah.
but working either nearby or eventually in the same town.
A town of 8 million.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I make it sound like it was, yeah, well, it's the size of London, where people might not have heard of it. And obviously traveled across Asia.
Yeah. Yeah.
We went to Japan together, Cambodia, Vietnam,
Taiwan.
Philippines, yeah, Taiwan.
Yeah. It's a lot.
So all around.
So yeah, I'll introduce myself a little bit now. Maybe some of you have seen me. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, not doing so well. Anyway, YouTube. It's called Did You Know History 89. Unfortunately, with YouTube, it's called Did You Know History 2023. 89 was taken, so I'll try to fix that in the future. But I was a history major in university. Always loved history. Um, I have people that I'm always interested in, always learning more about history. That's why I decided to try this channel with IG and YouTube. And yeah, I'm loving the process of sharing more history to people and to the fans and subs that are joining in. And I'm from Los Angeles, born and raised in LA. I'm Chinese Korean background. My mom is half Chinese, half Korean. My dad's Chinese, so yeah, always born and raised in LA. And I went to, like Robin said, we met each other in Korea, and I went to Korea and China in a way to kind of reconnect with my roots. So that was pretty cool. But another great thing with traveling was, or both of us and other friends that I've traveled with, is you get to see history and see a lot of different things, of the countries we're at. So yeah. Would you say what was your favorite country historically? Would you say?
In terms of
Yeah.
history, I mean, for me, you couldn't beat China, really. I mean, could
Really?
you?
Okay.
I think. I mean, I remember because I lived in Shenzhen,
Oh, right, 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 right. Yeah.
and that was like the what was it, like a fishing village in the 1980s. So of course, when you go there, and this is for those who don't know, it's a city that borders Hong Kong, and it's kind of been built up on the back of all the wealth in Hong Kong, and now I think it's got more money or something than Hong Kong, something
It's
like
the
that.
newest
But
city.
the point, yeah, the point
Yeah.
is on paper it looks like it wouldn't have much history, right? And you go there and it's like a lot of migrants from other parts of China have moved there. But I don't know, this always stood out to me because it was, you go to like where you catch the ferry to Hong Kong. I think it's sort of near there that the last, well, it was like one of the emperors drowned there,
Oh, right. I remember that. Yeah, you said that.
if you remember, yeah. Um, and then I think it was like a Ming Dynasty emperor, and then so yeah. So the point being that yeah, China is just everywhere. It's just sort of full of history, and really, I don't know how history that's so central to just sort of general human history in the sense of like where we are now as humans. So much of it, um, you know, relies on inventions and sort of technological developments in China, that kind of thing. So yeah, you can't. I personally think you can't beat China, but you might be.
For me, I would say historically the most interesting places
Mm,
are Japan. Um, I've been to Japan the most, and Japan is just very fascinating because of a lot of it's preserved. Some are rebuilt, but a lot of it is preserved. A lot of the things in China
yeah,
were rebuilt, so I mean,
but
I
then
get it.
but also a lot of the
It's not
castles
as
in Japan
authentic.
are rebuilt, aren't they? Yeah.
Fair, yes. A lot of them were rebuilt, and to be fair, some castles in Japan were like completely like this, like
Mm.
the castle in Nagoya wasn't
Oh.
even a castle. There wasn't a castle there. They just built
Mm.
one or something like that. Um, yeah, okay. So, like I said earlier with this podcast, basically we're just gonna have general. We're gonna have a specific, not specific, but like a general topic each video, and then we just talk about history around that topic. So today's video is just an introduction. So it's kind of more generic with our topics. Let's just say. Um, so Robin, do you think why do you think history in particular matters in the world? And if you want, I could go first, but just to give you a starter. But like, why do you think history matters in a way? And if you could try to bring up a specific, let's say, not cause and effect event, but just like something that happened here, and then it's related to not the present day, but it could be, but like related to what's
Well, for
happening
me,
now.
one of the things that one of the reasons why I feel quite passionate about history generally is that you kind of, there is a history of everything, right? So you've got like, if you wanted to do like,
Yes.
when we sort of have these discussions, we're talking about sort of general, human history. Like if you want to talk about China or Japan, and we talk about like emperors or architecture, building. But obviously, you can move beyond that. History of music, history of philosophy. People look into the way different ways of looking at the world throughout time. So you compare sort of like the thinking of Aristotle,
Yes.
compare that to the thinking of Confucius, um, as an example of like a sort of similar sort of time period. Um, and then yeah, you could really break it down to anything, even history of yeah, like architecture, history of politics, whatever. Yeah,
You're
yeah.
big on architecture. You know a lot about European
Well, yeah, I mean,
architecture.
and that's that's a really
Yeah.
important way to again understand history because obviously a lot goes into buildings. It's not just bricks and mortar. It's concepts of being itself. What it means to be a human and inhabiting a space, as it were. Not to get too abstract, but there are theories behind architecture and so forth, and the way it makes you feel being in it.
Do you have a favorite
Yeah,
European architecture? What
mine is
period? I
definitely.
mean,
I would say architecture, music, maybe painting as well, art. But definitely music and architecture has to be the Baroque period for me. So the Baroque period is around the earliest would be probably around 1600, but more towards sort of 1650 to around 1750. Um,
is there like a because I've never been to Europe. Maybe an audience would be shocked by that. But what do you what's your is there like a specifically famous
well, one that
Baroque
you
building?
would know very much about, which would be Versailles. Versailles is definitely very much in the Baroque period. The
Oh,
reason, I suppose, the way
I
you would
see.
notice it if you come to Europe, that's very obviously Baroque building is it's just more ornate, like yeah. I mean,
Oh, okay.
not we don't need to get into
Hmm.
too much, but basically, and again, this goes back to what I was saying before about architecture as being a way of um, sort of it's not just bricks and mortar. I mean, what Baroque architecture really was about was um, showing the kind of the power of the aristocracy during this time, because obviously this was just running up to the
Right.
French Revolution, which is arguably
Yes.
when European aristocracy was at its most kind of I don't know. Well, you could say arrogant, maybe most optimistic about it. Yeah, zenith, right? Yeah.
Zenith
So
in a way too.
obviously,
Right.
you can look at it and be like, this is kind of ultra extravagance, over the top, kind of. And obviously, we know Versailles was
Baroque. Okay.
the building of it was quite exploitative
Yes.
towards the laborers and the French
Right.
taxpayer, or
Right.
whatever. But as a tourist, as someone who admires buildings, it's great. It's to enjoy that. But yeah,
Right.
and
Is
so
Buckingham
that's
Palace Baroque?
yeah. I mean,
A
it's
bit
sort
later.
of I think it's 1820s. And what's interesting about that is Baroque
Oh.
architecture definitely exists in Britain, but it was not as it didn't make as much of an impact as it did on the continent, European continent. And I think that ties in with the fact
Right.
that
Right. Right.
the British aristocracy, and this is obviously debatable, but maybe they had a sense that you needed to kind of like because also Baroque architecture is very much linked with Catholicism and the power of the aristocracy, the power of the king, the power of the church, the absolute monarch, divine right, all that sort of stuff. Those ideas weren't as prevalent in Britain because of the Reformation. There was less of a sense of like um, I don't know, like kind of that it's Baroque architecture is supposed to have a kind of imposition, it's imposing, and I suppose British architecture tends to be a bit more understated, and obviously something like Buckingham, yeah, well, yeah,
As Brits
well,
are.
it's obviously affected the culture in many ways, not just the buildings, but yeah, Buckingham Palace definitely very understated, right? I mean, I think it was described even when it was built as like a country, like a rich farmer's house kind of thing. Like it wasn't even that even at the time it was built, it wasn't viewed as being an amazing building or anything. I don't know what the history is, but I mean it's quite interesting. I don't even know if it was built specifically as a royal residence at first, but
Yeah. Um, but as the question I first asked Robin is, you can see history is very much significant to what he thinks of with what he explained with Baroque architecture and comparing it to the aristocracy of the time. So, okay, that was good. So for me, what I would say is why I think history matters is especially more in the modern sense. A lot of historical connections and stories and events, they can all connect to the present day. So for me, one of the most, I mean, of course, with America, like as an American, we have the Constitution, we have the Civil War. Of course, what happened in the Civil War is directly connected to the present day. How people are, that we still have race problems, we still have states not agreeing with each other. It's all stems from the Civil War and people not agreeing with each other and establishing different laws that might affect certain races, and then it finally was resolved in 1969 with the Civil Rights Act. But a more specific one I want to mention was that I really like connecting is Napoleon Bonaparte. He's actually the image on the YouTube and IG page. Um, it's Napoleon Bonaparte with what he established as, I guess, the law of France at the time. It was the Napoleonic Code, the Code Napoleon, and I don't know every single specific minute details of the Code Napoleon, but a lot of the I guess the policies within the code actually carry on to the present day. For example, he legalized divorce, which is something that a lot of people probably don't even realize, right? Especially now, everyone's getting divorced. Okay, my parents are divorced, um, but yeah, he legalized divorce, and that's pretty much something that's widely, I mean, I would say mostly accepted around the world.
Legalized, yeah, well, legalized
Even in areas of
homosexuality
Asia.
as well. And that, yeah, and it's interesting
I didn't know
because
that.
a lot of countries in Africa that were colonized by France don't have what they're termed like anti-sodomy laws, but the British colonies, the
Mm,
ex-British colonies, do. So, like Uganda, for example, the Napoleonic Code. I mean, that's why Italy, for example, after Napoleon, they never reinstated laws against it. Yeah.
so yeah, something else I was going to say right after was yes, and with the Napoleonic Code and the fever of revolution in France and all that, it carried into other countries in Europe. So that's probably something that a lot of, because I have some followers that are from Europe and they probably don't even realize that a lot of their modern ideals and how their countries were set up post Napoleonic times were directly affected by Napoleon. Like I know Italy was directly affected by that. It was the revolution of 1868, no 48, where like a bunch of countries in Europe basically all adopted the same ideals
Well,
as the
nationalism,
French
yeah.
Revolution had,
Well,
and they started,
yeah, yeah.
or in just modern nationalism, and they modernized their countries. And I don't I know this is some people who I'm not sure if Polish people think this way, but they say Napoleon was the first person to try and reestablish Poland. He is a little iffy on that part, but he did try to do that, and you
Yeah.
could say for his own personal things. But he did a lot of things where modern nationalism was instilled into countries, such as Italy wasn't a country like before Napoleon, even after Napoleon died, it was not a country. People probably don't realize that. Um, Germany was not a country. Austria-Hungary was an empire, but it wasn't a country in that sense. Poland, Portugal, Spain, these countries, these places didn't have the kind of nationalism that France had, and that definitely stemmed from Napoleon and the Code. And I think that's a direct example of why I think history is very fascinating, because you see a lot of these direct connections where this happened and then this event happened and then the result is this. So I didn't go too much into Civil War, but that's a very large, wide topic. But yeah, same logic. Um, okay, cool. So could you bring up, with the talk of general introduction, could you just bring up like a specific thing of why you think history is interesting, not necessarily significant in your mind, but just why you think, oh, this is a very interesting period. Like this is something that I really like.
I think for me, I love well, I mean, I love history generally, but I don't know, I find it quite fascinating these kind of transition periods. Like, for example, I like sort of beginnings and ends, as it were. Like, so for example, like with the Roman Empire, like, it would be very usual to sort of look at the kind of, I don't know, like Julius Caesar or Augustus,
Hmm.
when it's at its height. Well, it wasn't at its height then. I don't know what historians would say was the height of the Roman Empire. Like,
They say the height of the Roman Empire was
right? Oh, yeah, that
during
would make
Hadrian.
sense. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, the
Oh, yeah.
year of the four good the year of the good emperor, whatever, the
Right.
four good emperors. That's the
Yeah. Okay,
zenith
that
of the
makes sense.
Roman Empire.
But
Yeah.
I think like looking into, because like the fall of the Roman Empire, for example, is like it's almost politically kind of charged as well. It has been in Europe because of issues of like for example, like when the British Empire was coming to a close, uh, there was this talk of like, oh, it's going to bring about a new dark age of like in the world and that kind of thing. And this was a kind of
Mm,
a what's it called? Yeah,
recurring
yeah,
theme.
recurrent theme. I mean, there are even people arguing it now. Sort of saying like, oh, it's just like the fall. Or yeah, you see it. It's about even with in American politics. People talk about like we're watching the fall of the
Yeah,
American
right.
empire or whatever. And
Mm,
but it's just interesting. Obviously, the Roman Empire. I think the fall of it in particular, continues to be very debated and what caused it and whatnot. But even things like, for example, like what you were talking about, I mean, the Napoleonic era, just sort of redefined Europe and the world because of Europe's
yes.
influence in the world at the time.
Yeah.
And I think it's almost like you look at before and after. I mean, it's just like a completely new reality, and I think that's always really interesting looking at those kind of big sort of epochal changes. Because I mean, if you look at yeah, no, this is
Even
I mean, if you look at
no, go
like the
on. Yeah.
rest of the
Sorry.
18th century leading up to the French Revolution, I mean, I'm sure this is very
Mhm.
debatable, but it looks very, I don't know, like kind of calm compared to other periods of history. Just in the sense of like, I'm talking about Europe, by the way. I'm not talking about obviously the rest of the world. But Europe, just I mean, there were wars like the war of the Austrian succession, Spanish succession, that kind of thing. But it's almost like
Mhm.
everything's quite calm, and then you get Napoleon, and then everything's just suddenly changed in the space of like a decade.
I would say the French
Oh no,
Revolution
well, yeah,
caused
when
that.
I say the Napoleonic age, I mean the the whole thing. I
You
mean,
mean
you
you
can't
mean the
have
period? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Napoleon
Right.
without the revolution.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
all yeah. Right.
Exactly, exactly. Yes, yes. And just to mentioning the other question I had earlier, some people that probably don't even realize that are American. Again, a direct cause and effect. So France used to control a third of the U.S., the modern U.S. now. Well, if you're not including Hawaii, Alaska, I mean, not Hawaii, Alaska. France used to control a third of the U.S. and basically Napoleon needed money, and he was fighting a war against the colonial possession in Haiti. No, wait, Haiti. Yes, Haiti. And basically, he was losing. Well, it wasn't Napoleon that fought it, but like there was a rebellion prior to Napoleon, and then he came into power, and then he had to fight it too, and he needed money, so he basically sold hit all of his American possessions to America. So again, I think I'm sure a lot of people who reside in those states they probably realize that the Louisiana Purchase is that's how where we pretty much got your states from, right? The lands of the states, I mean. Of course, it's Native American lands, but yeah, that's another direct result of Napoleon.
Yeah.
Yeah, like for me, like you mentioned the Roman Empire. Roman Empire for me is the most fascinating historical like length of period of time. Um, my favorite is definitely during the imperial times. I like emperors. What can I say? So yeah, definitely the Roman Empire is always very fascinating to me. Even though it seems like half of the stories and backgrounds are possibly fake or embellished, but the Roman Empire has always been very fascinating to me, and the significance it had on world history. Like sometimes randomly I saw an image someone posted on IG of the Mongolian Empire, and they were saying it's the largest contiguous empire in the world, and it's so vast and large. I think the British was
But
bigger, right? Still,
yeah, like contiguous landmass. Yeah.
one line, like one land, yeah. And then the interesting thing was they were like, so in this IG picture, they were like, but look at the Roman Empire, and they said the Roman Empire lasted like 1,500 years longer
Well,
in a
yeah, if
way
you
or
include
something,
the
something crazy.
Byzantine, Eastern Roman Empire. Yeah.
Well, I do.
Oh no, no. Oh, even that.
Oh
Like,
no, I was including the I no, I meant, okay, maybe not 1,500. It was like
right.
1,000 years longer because I'm
Yeah,
including
yeah.
the Roman kingdom with the
Was
Republic,
that
and then the empire
700
ending in
BC? I want to say was
452.
that something like that. They killed the
Yeah,
king.
so again, that's the Roman Empire, the embellishing thing. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Tarquinius or something. Um, yeah, but that's just It's just a kind of a crazy thing of history where you just look at the Roman Empire. It's like, damn,
Well, you got to
it
come to
lasted
Europe,
that long.
and because you will see. I mean, because I went to Turkey. Well, I mean, a little bit of Turkey's in Europe, but you go all across the Mediterranean, and you just see the evidence of the Romans, and it's not like, oh, there's like a column. It's like
It's
there's a
crazy.
lot. There's a lot.
Right,
And to
right.
think, yeah, like a society that long ago made this imprint on a geography is, yeah, it's quite stunning to see. And I mean, because you were talking about Hadrian before, I mean, everywhere you go in the Mediterranean, you will find statues of Hadrian because he was like one of the big travelers, well, one of the emperors that traveled the most, kind of thing. And
Hmm.
it's just, I don't know, it's all, you could draw comparisons to the modern age of like a celebrity known across the globe. Back then, it was like the emperor was, his face is on every coin around the empire. The statues are everywhere, and we're talking about people who were still, the vast majority of people were still living quite a desperate life on farms, and yet they still managed to create this civilization. Yeah.
Yeah, another thing I mentioned earlier was the U.S. Constitution, how it directly affects the present day. So with the Constitution, a lot of basically our entire legal understanding and legal decisions are all based on a document that was made 230, 40 years ago. And a lot of people may not like the way they do things with the Constitution, but that's how it's directly related. And we have to look at each amendment and even the Declaration of Independence and to see how it relates to our present day laws. And if we wanted to basically create a new law that would go across the entire United States, we would have to look at the process that is stated in the Constitution, which is we have to do a constitutional convention. An amendment needs to be approved by 2/3 of the states. Now, people may not realize at that time it was only 13 states, so you needed 7 or 8 states to just vote in favor, or 9 states to vote in favor. Now it would be like 35 states. So that's why people would say things that America could never make a law now, because would 35 states ever agree? And those individuals voting within 35 states, would they elect the right people to, seemingly vote in favor of that new amendment? So I think that's very interesting, comparing the beginnings of America with the Constitution with the present day Constitution. So these are direct connections. So that's pretty much our introduction video, and we're trying to expand upon this every single podcast we do. Some might be longer, some might be shorter. The next podcast is not going to be Robin; it's going to be my other friend Chris. But yeah, basically every time we do a podcast, we're just trying to do a general topic and just go over things about that topic, and it can go in many directions. But also with our podcast, because I have followers from Instagram, they submit me questions for the podcast. So we have some questions today. They might be a bit broad, so we might give a more specific answer or a more nuanced answer that hopefully they're okay with. So the first question we have is from Nuxo PST. Okay, he said a very generic question. The question was military coups in South America. So I could start off with that. It's a very broad question. So I've done quite a few daily videos now where I try to include some things about South America, and unfortunately a lot of it involves coups. So definitely from the 50s up to the late 80s, maybe early 90s, there have been a ton of military coups in South America. I'm not as familiar with them, but there's a ton. Now maybe the question is being asked because what about American involvement? Because I'm American, right? I'm interpreting the question this way. And yes, America has been directly involved in a ton of military coups across South America and across the world. So some more direct ones was in Chile with Pinochet being removed. There was this is not really a coup, but the Iran-Contra affair with selling weapons to Contra rebels, Nicaragua. You know, there's the situations in. No, this is, I guess, very present day with Venezuela. Not coups, but just direct American involvement with supporting the.
Did you say Cuba? Because obviously.
Oh yeah, okay. I haven't said Cuba yet.
Together. Oh right. No,
Cuba is North America. North America.
Oh, I see what you mean. Oh yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I was thinking of North. I was thinking. No, but for sure, Cuba is involved. But I was thinking South America only. But Cuba is directly involved.
Yeah.
Cuba is like the Bay of Pigs. Even prior to that, our involvement with actually attacking Spain, or attacking Spain, or Spain attacked us in the Spanish-American War. All these things. So, yeah, it's a lot for the Americans involved in coups, and again, like I said, South America alone also had a lot of coups, and I'm sure Central America too. So, do you know anything about you could bring up?
I mean, yeah. I think it's quite interesting how I'm pretty sure South America is ranked as what would it be? Something like the least conflictual continent in terms of the number of wars that have been fought since, the kind of the emergence of modern day South American countries after, the sort of Simon Bolivar
Times, yeah.
Sort of kicking out the Spanish. And since then, there have been wars fought. The one I know most about, and then even then I know very little about it. It's I believe is it Bolivia used to have a coastline. There's a country there's a country in South America that used to have a coastline that no longer has one.
I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, it's still like a contentious issue even today. Because having a coastline is very important and essential. I mean, we've even seen that in the recent conflict with Russia and Ukraine. Where Russia needs that access to the Mediterranean.
I should say also, I have a coming up daily video where there's a direct coup mentioned, but it's a little different. It involves a marshal who deposed the Brazilian emperor, and that's a direct coup that commonly happens in South America, and that is something people may not even realize, that Brazil had an emperor. Okay, but yeah,
I think also I would say, and I think it was a Scottish historian, I believe, Niall Ferguson or Neil Ferguson, however you pronounce it, who is definitely, I suppose, is considered more leaning towards the right in terms of his views on world history. But I think I'm pretty sure it's him that was looking into the differences between, because you had the Americans and you just had North America was what? Primarily British. some French influence. Well, I mean, there's a lot of Spanish influence until obviously that receded as the British sort of another colonist sort of moved west and whatever and took over places like California, Arizona, whatever, New Mexico, and but then you had South America, which was purely again there was like some influence from the British in was it Guyana or French as well, but it's primarily Spanish and Portuguese, and I think he was looking into why, what can we gain from looking into that history to understand why, for example, the United States of America and Canada are so sort of wildly successful, whereas a country like Argentina, which almost took off and became one of the richest countries on earth. I think for a while it was second only to the US. I think maybe maybe I'm getting that wrong, but it was a very wealthy country for a long time in the Americas at least as well. And then obviously that's changed, and the US is really like the trajectory of the US has sort of gone very much to like massive wealth, massive global impact, whatever. Whereas South American countries haven't had that. Why is that? I mean,
A bit of what you said about why why are Americans even involved in the backyard? They consider the South America the backyard. It's because of the Monroe Doctrine, and the Monroe Doctrine was 1823. So a lot of at that time, America had already fought two wars against the British. This is after War of 1812. So definitely, the doctrine stated that whatever is south of America, whatever is that divides Europe and the Americas, the United States will directly involve themselves in their affairs. And they said that if the British or French or other outside powers were to get involved, then it would be direct, not an attack, but direct. It would require an American involvement. So, that's kind of why America gets involved in these scenarios. I'm not saying it's right, but that's the doctrine we use.
well, on that question of is it right? I think something that's quite interesting about this issue of the coups in Latin America, but specifically South America, is that kind of sort of the debate between the kind of the realist thinking and the kind of the more idealistic thinking. Because I suppose if you compare it, for example, to this
Spheres
idea
of
of
influence,
spheres of
yeah,
influence,
spheres of
because
influence.
that's what the Monroe Doctrine was about. Yeah, that issue
Yep.
remains today. I mean, look at
Yes.
the South China Sea. So there's a question of you've got the Americans and other, I think the UN as well, saying, "Oh, the South China Sea is like an international body of water," and then the Chinese government saying, "Well, actually, no, this is somewhere where this is our sphere of influence," and it's the same with South America because obviously there's been this legacy of like America viewing it as this is our backyard, and I think I remember seeing someone raise this point, which is would say like would America allow, for example, the Chinese to build a base in Mexico?
Yes. Yes.
I mean,
No.
we have a historic precedent for that, which is yeah, but we have a historic precedent for that, which is obviously the Cuban Missile Crisis, where the Americans was just like, no, like you're not having these missiles anywhere near it. And it's kind of like and this is unfortunately where you get this kind of debate between the realists who say, look, like it's all well and nice having these nice ideas about free bodies of water and like every country has its own right to determine its path, but then when you've got these big power games between the big world powers, they view it quite differently, and they're thinking in terms of more strategic, like how do we protect our interests, our populace, how do we play the kind of Darwinian game of the great powers. And I think that's what South America's unfortunately been sort of caught up in as well. And it was originally, as
Yeah.
you say, it was between the Western European powers and the Americans. and it might in the future be the Americans, and then it became, of course, the Americans and the Russians during the Cold War. Maybe it'll be the Americans and the Chinese in the future, unless we all sort of embrace the more idealistic approach, and every country has its own destiny.
Right. Right. So we'll go to the next question now. This question, we'll try to make it short because it's just a little too broad. The person asked, Nate Widgery, they asked for a biology breakdown of Tchaikovsky. So let's just do a quick talk about this one.
Oh, sorry, biography.
I think it said biography. Oh, biography. Why did I say biology? Sorry, biography of Tchaikovsky. He was a man, I believe. No.
XY something.
So, of Tchaikovsky. So, the only thing that I know about Tchaikovsky, and I really enjoyed it, is again related to Napoleon, is his Overture of 1812, which was a grand.
Had a canon.
Yes, multiple cannons. Yeah. A grand orchestra. About. Do I say orchestra? Okay, the grand orchestra talking about, or playing the theme of the Russians defending Russia against Napoleon and the French escaping. So that's all I can say about Tchaikovsky. Anything quick you could say about Tchaikovsky?
Quick, oh dear. I mean, I just think Tchaikovsky's important in sort of that, that kind of thing of, is Russia Europe or not? Is Russia Europe or Asian? And the reason I bring that up is just because obviously Tchaikovsky is very much in the romantic Western music tradition. So romanticism was primarily the 19th century as the music. It was a musical era that Tchaikovsky was very much part of, and it's interesting because Russian music at that time became wildly popular and successful across Europe, and it's almost like in the 19th century Russia became viewed as a European power, because obviously you had Peter the Great and then Catherine and whatever. But I think really in the 19th century is when
they defeated Napoleon. Yeah.
Right. And I think it's just interesting to sort of contextualize Tchaikovsky in that, because that music was obviously it had Russian elements, but that was really European music.
But what was most of his music highlighting Russia, like Russia is great type of thing?
Probably because the period of Romanticism, which is again mostly 19th century, and like more the latter half, but earlier too. But it's like it's very linked to nationalism. So a lot of composers of music would, for example, have this, the orchestral music and the very elaborate, sophisticated, you might say, musical themes and musical techniques and whatnot, and the instruments. But they might have they might draw on folk music in their more elaborate music settings, or whatever. Or they would be celebrating historical events like the 1812, the Battle of 1812.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely, big sort of celebration of the nation in romantic music.
Okay.
And Tchaikovsky is definitely part of that.
So go into our last question, which is kind of the same theme of Russia. It's by Axton Alex. We'll try to make this short because we're actually going quite long. It's a very general question, the Bolshevik Revolution. I don't want to go too deep into it. Basically, Bolshevik Revolution definitely, I would say, you could say, is one of the most pivotal moments in history, in modern history. Basically, starting in 1917. Yes, right before World War I ended. Started in 1917, and basically, that's when communism basically came into existence into a nation, and the revolution definitely changed the world. Where it's still happening in the present day, kind of like you still have communist nations like China and North Korea that are trying to have their own decisions that could conflict with the democracies like the West. You had the Cold War that directly stemmed from the Bolshevik Revolution, the different leaders that came from the revolution, Stalin. I just did a video today where it mentioned Trotsky being removed by Stalin, and yeah, world history definitely changed because of the Bolshevik Revolution, and yeah, I mean it's trying to make this quick, but yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to like this too
Yeah,
broad.
but you could talk, yeah, you
Days.
could talk for a very long time. I mean, you know, as I was saying earlier, like I quite like these transitional
Hmm.
periods, studying them. I mean, I think they're particularly interesting, and you see the kind of the real sort of death of that old Russia, of
Yes.
you know the Tsars and the Orthodox Church, but then of course you see a lot of continuation. So the Tsars became the Soviet
Yeah.
dictators essentially, and the Orthodox religion was taken over by Marxism. Um, so it's quite interesting, sort of looking at the continuation even after the Bolshevik Revolution. I would also say I think I've only looked into this very briefly, but it's quite interesting that no, this could be a very controversial topic that people might want to look into, but it, it was like I think early 1920s, so just after the Bolshevik Revolution. People like Lenin and others, although Lenin less so, I think. But there were these like Russian leaders who started to they really wanted to dismantle the old Russia, and they even, for example, so they allowed divorce. I think abortion was legalized, but even I want to say like this idea of the family and all that sort of stuff was viewed as very bourgeois and like Western capitalist, and they wanted to get rid of. I mean, I need to look into it a bit more myself, but I would encourage anyone who's listening into this to look into it as well, because it was a moment, I guess, like with the French Revolution, it was a moment where everything suddenly became possible. And when they tried these things, they quickly went
I think what
backwards.
you're trying to say is basically with the revolution, a lot of social norms were changed because
But then also quickly brought back, like,
yeah, yeah, right,
that
right.
was very
But I
useful.
what you're
Yeah,
trying to say is like it
what
was a
worked and what didn't.
huge period of a massive change where things politically, governmentally, structurally, everything socially changed, and then quickly reverted back in a different form.
Yeah, because I
Yeah.
mean, if you look at post Bolshevik Revolution Russia, I mean, still quite patriarchal. I mean, you know, you obviously ended up with women fighting in Stalingrad, for example, in the Second World War. I mean, there were definitely changes in that sense, but I think I want to say marriage. I think there was an attempt to actually abolish the institution
I wouldn't know
of
that.
marriage. Yeah, I mean, maybe I might be wrong, but I'm almost certain that happened and it was quickly got rid of because they sort of understood that that probably wouldn't necessarily work, basically.
Well,
Anyway, very potentially a very controversial
like
topic
we
there,
said,
but
this topic is a little bit too. This question is a little too broad and
it's very big.
it's
Yeah,
huge.
definitely.
So yeah, that's pretty much it for our first podcast, the introduction one. Hope you like it. We're still learning the format, and you probably have noticed like we're doing this very bare bones. Robin and I are on a video call together, and we're filming ourselves. So we're trying our best to make this, make this work down the line in a more, I guess, professional setting. But yeah, hope you enjoyed it, and leave comments below. Please follow, like, subscribe, share. Digital History 2023. Also check out the IG, Digital History 89. So, yep, thank you guys, and we'll see you soon. Peace.